Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we're currently searching for in Dallas. We have a number of firms that are looking right now, including firms looking for business and commercial litigation positions, construction litigation position, real estate and transactional attorney, a commercial bankruptcy litigation position, a trial boutique, and then a white-collar opportunity more at a mid-sized firm. So those are all happening now in Dallas. In Austin, a family law attorney as well as a commercial and insurance litigation position. In Tarrant County, family law, and in Fort Worth, corporate and real estate. Then in Houston, a personal injury attorney as well as insurance defense. In San Antonio, looking for commercial bankruptcy litigation, 2 bankruptcies this week. And then also just general commercial litigation. And then in Tyler, an IP and commercial litigation position as well as a transactional attorney. So all over the state, a lot of opportunities right now available. If you're thinking about getting into the lateral market, seeing what's out there, would love to visit with you. So please do send me an email at daniel@varsitysearch.com. I would love to visit with you. All right, today we are in San Antonio, where our guest is Lauren Valkenaar. Lauren is a partner at Chasnoff Stribling, where she focuses on complex commercial litigation involving contractual provisions, breach of fiduciary duties, and fraud, usually for clients in industries such as technology, cybersecurity, real estate, and others. Lauren is a 2021 Texas Super Lawyer Rising Star and has been a Best San Antonio Lawyer 4 times, as well as a top attorney in San Antonio in 2021. Those are 2 different publications. She also serves on the Board of Directors for Respite Care of San Antonio and is a director and past president of the Defense Council of San Antonio. Quite a lot on that resume. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Lauren Valkenaar on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Lauren Valkenaar joins us right now. Lauren, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
Well, I'm excited to visit with you. And let's start by hearing about your firm and your practice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Great. So I'm a partner at Chasnoff Stribling. We are a boutique litigation firm here in San Antonio, Texas. My practice is almost entirely business and commercial litigation. And really, we were a break off of a much larger firm here in town. Really wanted to continue to maintain the same level of quality and work for our clients, but have a little more control and autonomy, and really strive to have a very high level trial team, be able to be incredibly flexible and nimble in cases that are complex, dealing across a broad spectrum of breach of contract, fiduciary issues, tortious interference, fraud, anything that might come to be an issue for officers, directors, or any sort of business.
Fantastic. Yeah, you really are the kind of the picture of the big law boutique, right? I mean, has jumped off and done your own thing, and it's working out well, it sounds like. And so congrats to all of you for that, for sure. What are some of the latest developments or things that are happening within your practice area or within some of the issues your clients are facing? And we can talk about COVID or treat that separately, however you'd like, 'cause I'm sure that's going on. But we also had a legislative session that closed recently, and so I don't know if there's anything there. But just curious what some of the issues more recently that have been impacting you all.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think COVID has really dramatically changed the way that we practice. And quite frankly, I think in some ways that will not go away even after the pandemic. So as a litigator, really the impact of us not being able to physically get into the courtroom has been something that I've been pleasantly surprised at how quickly we've been able to adapt. And I really do think that Zoom hearings are probably here to stay. I like a in-person contact, and I think there's something to be said about the persuasiveness of being in person. But in reality, our clients get sued all over the country, and the flexibility and, quite frankly, the efficiency of being able to just jump on a Zoom and talk to a judge on a routine hearing, I think is a positive thing for the practice of law. Zoom depositions are kind of another matter because I do think those, you really do need to be in person for those. And there's a number of fights going on right now with kind of things opening back up and now starting to close back up as to what the right balance is.
Yeah.
But, I think that we all have learned how really the use of technology can really help in terms of making us more efficient as a team and the way that we relate with our clients and with the court system. So it certainly has been challenging. And then there's all sorts of, with really our clients, mostly businesses, are dealing with how do they coordinate with their employees. So there's issues cropping up with, obligations for making employees come in person. If we are in a lawsuit, how do we make sure we capture all the documents? People are more likely to be saving things locally, not on the cloud. How do we make sure we gather the right documents? So I think in terms of the problems of our clients, we've seen those evolve as COVID has certainly impacted the way that they conduct their own businesses as well.
Yeah, it does seem like over the last year that everyone's had to, in some ways, become an employment lawyer, in GCing some of the employment stuff with their clients, and then also, just really having to walk through a lot of these issues on the litigation side in the courtroom. Or not the courtroom, as it were, with the technology pieces. So, and just one quick note on that. I had a good reminder this morning. And so for everyone listening, like start to get comfortable with Zoom and get, feel like how to do it all and stuff like that. Well, it had been a little bit, I guess it had been maybe a couple of weeks since I just had the need to be on a Zoom call, and I tried to get on one this morning, and there was something wrong with my software. It was just not working, and I'd waited until a few minutes before to try to hop on, and I had to wound up having to take it completely off my computer and reloading it, the software completely, before I could figure out what was wrong with it. It was just not working and responding. It kept like freezing up and all that. So for everyone who's feeling a little good, complacent, you got it all figured out, it might be good to just remember to get in there early, get things set up, everything, and just make sure you got the updated versions, because with the technology, it's just, you don't want to have a client or a witness or for sure a judge to be the one to discover you have problems with your technology.
Yeah, I'm not a cat. I mean, everyone is that was a nice Texas lawyer, and I think it's the horror story heard around the world, but certainly has developed new problems we never had to think about before. Absolutely.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned you all are in San Antonio, and I did want to ask you about that. How would you describe the nature of the bar in San Antonio and the legal practice there? Pros, cons, or just obviously being obviously a huge city, but with a smaller legal market than maybe Houston or Dallas, where a lot of the folks that listen and a lot of the folks we talk with. So I'd love just to kind of get a sense of the San Antonio market from you.
Yeah, no. So I'm kind of a unique person in that I don't have any family here. My husband doesn't have any family here. So we actually have chosen to be in San Antonio, and a large part of that is due to the collegiality of the San Antonio bar. San Antonio is great in that it is really it feels like a small town, but it has all the amenities of Dallas or Houston. And I just am so proud of how San Antonio is really kind of bound together. You can't really be that big of a jerk in San Antonio because you're going to be up against the same lawyers again.
Right.
And the level of professionalism and mentorship that I've received. I have just such a wonderful blessing of the lawyers that kind of trained me in this business and how invested they are in really bringing up the next generation of lawyers and talent. And, I'm not sure, it could be that it's like that everywhere, but I really do feel like San Antonio is special in really how close the lawyers are, really when you're all in the same business, that they continue to be friends and really a helping hand across the entire legal field.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when we talk about the different markets in Texas, I get similar feelings and comments about San Antonio's market as I do when I talk about Fort Worth market and Tarrant County, and some of those same advantages of being the big city and all the amenities, but the closer knit bar and the more collegiality, and so it's as folks are out there listening and thinking about where you want to kind of plant your flag and build your practice, things like that. These are all good things to think about and consider. Obviously, a lot of people are going to choose Dallas, Houston, Austin for a variety of reasons, but there's definitely a lot of great reasons to consider the mid-sized markets legally. They're still huge cities. It's hard to even say from a city standpoint that they're anything but large, but it's awesome.
Well, and I'll say this too, is that as a young professional, there's so much more opportunity here to really, make an impact on the city. I think as the city of San Antonio is really growing and kind of going into that next stage of development, and to be able to be part of that. And then also just the opportunities that I've been able to have in San Antonio, at the level that I've been able to quickly, kind of be able to feel like I have a voice. I'm not sure that would be as equally available in a larger market. So that's another great opportunity for people looking at San Antonio.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, I want to ask you about, or ask you to think back to when you were first getting started in practice. Maybe what's something that you learned or picked up from a mentor or a partner or someone who gave some good advice to you at some point, something that you learned in those early couple of years of practice that has stuck with you and is still part of how you practice now today?
Gosh, that's a great question. There's been a lot of really great mentorship that I've received over the years. I think the biggest thing that really was instilled in me and where I started, which was Fulbright and Jaworski, that later became Norton Rose Fulbright, was an internal standard, really a desire to get it right, over and above kind of just feeling like I've checked the box, but knowing that ultimately, regardless of what piece I have and role I have in a case, that I am servicing the client and really thinking about servicing their ultimate interest, and knowing that, really I am the only one that's going to know if I fully ran an issue to ground, if I really went the extra mile, and just knowing and really being in an environment where excellence was really the low level. You have to really exceed for our clients, was a really great environment to kind of start to become a lawyer in, because really being a lawyer, I found, is a lot of internal motivation, and really it's a team practice, and that's what I like about what I do, is I get to work with a lot of really talented lawyers and learn from them, and we push each other, but you really have to be the one at the end of the day to know that you're doing the best that you can for your clients. And so knowing that what you're doing is not just an assignment, but has real and impacting impact, because there's not always going to be a partner when I was brand new that's going to be able to check every citation, and really, the level of kind of confidence and enough rope to hang yourself is a good motivator as a young attorney, to make sure that you internally are performing to a standard you feel comfortable with.
Sure. Do you feel like that's something that is learned or can be learned, as opposed to something that's sort of just included in the traits that a person has? I know sometimes when I'm talking with partners or employers as they're considering resumes or interviewing candidates, things like that, a lot of times they will talk about things like, self-motivated, or, something along those lines, sort of getting at what you're talking about of having that internal standard that you don't have to be motivated or driven by someone else or something like that. It's kind of like an internal trait, or a built-in trait that people just naturally have. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. Is that something that can be learned or taught, or do you really have to kind of find it as something they've maybe born with or learned when they were a 3 and 5 and 8-year-old and they're growing upstate?
I think there is a large component of if you need to be born with it. And I think probably, there's some sort of selection bias that if you get to, kind of to be a lawyer, I think that takes a certain level of internal motivation. But I do think that some things can be taught if there's proper motivation and guidance. I do think that, the people that you surround yourself with in the practice of law kind of set the bar in terms of really what is the standard. And I think that I've learned and been able to grow and be stretched because of the people that I practice with, that I don't know I would have gone as far on my own, or I know I wouldn't. But certainly I do agree with you that, there's a piece of it that either, you kind of have that drive or you don't. And I think probably the people that end up kind of in the same areas probably have a similar level of that. But I also think that there's kind of an important, everybody can find a place in a team based on their own skill sets. And I think that, if somebody doesn't have kind of that internal metric, I think there is a level that it can be stretched if there's a desire. But I do think if you have no kind of internal guidance on that or no motivating factor, that, there could be another better fit or better role.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it kind of reminds me of the other kind of idea about, you're the middle, or you're the middle of the 5 people closest to you or whatever. You're in the middle of that. And so kind of the people that you put around you, the idea is, the higher level of the people, depending on what you're talking about, if it's the case, practice of law, like that you wind up being in, like you're going to be in the midst of that group, and like you're kind of pulled into that. Again, like I think we understand there's probably some built-in levels of motivation and desire that have to be part of that. But that I think that's true, that people, if they're in a work environment that people are either, don't care as much or don't hold themselves to the higher standard, like it's going to be natural for people to fall into that, and vice versa. And so I've experienced that and seen that in different places I've worked as well. And so, which is a lot to put onto the environment that a firm creates, and the standards that are expected too, I think it is a key component to that. So that's interesting. Well, okay, so once you were at the large law firm, then you came over and with the Chasnoff Stribling folks and started here. What has been something that you've learned more recently, and maybe in kind of the smaller firm environment, that was a new thing for you that maybe would have been good for you to learn earlier, you wish you would have known before?
Well, I certainly know a lot more about running a business, and I think that is invaluable because I represent businesses. And so in terms of kind of that lens, I don't think I would have grown in the ways that I've grown and kind of learned that. I will say that, I've learned a lot more about, working with different types of people, and from a variety of different backgrounds, and that has been really exciting and interesting to kind of have. I had worked with the same group of people for almost my entire career, and so really being able, and we have an interesting number of people in our firm that are actually from out of town and not the Texas market, who have moved here for one reason or another, and so that's been really interesting to learn from them. But, I think there's certainly a level of client service that when you are owning your business and owning your firm, that I think I probably, always was instilled in me to a certain extent. But when you are really the master of your own ship, and you are directly, making an impact in your clients, day to day, I think that really makes that you have to be as responsive as possible to what they need, and ultimately the level of responsibility that you feel kind of being in a smaller environment is something that I think is helpful, because it's a lot more real, in terms of the day to day, than if you're kind of in a big law firm where a lot of other things are kind of there's a lot of additional helping hands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of it all just falls on you in the smaller firm environment. There's no doubt. Well, as you've observed associates over the years in both environments, large firm and small, what's something that you've picked out or seen in them that helps them to stand out in a positive way in your eyes? What's something that the young lawyers listening right now should be thinking about in terms of how they can impress the folks around them?
So I think a couple of things. First is if you are a team player, that shows up almost immediately. And, I think that you're going to spend more time with the people you work with than probably your family, especially in your first few years of practice.
Sure.
And, the partners notice whether you get along with your colleagues and, whether you're kind of there late at night helping out if somebody is really in a crunch, or, you kind of say, oh, it's not my case, and walk out the door. And I think, that was one of the first things when, I was working here that really stood out to me is there were two associates working, and one had nothing to do with the case, but was still there because there was a deadline that needed to be met. So that really makes you stand out over and above. Obviously, the excellence of your work product. I'm somebody that really focuses on, the way that the product looks. I think we sell our words, and we sell what the document looks like. So you want it to be as typo-free as possible. The formatting needs to look clean and professional. And even when you're transmitting something internally, I'm of the mindset, and it stands out when there's an associate that sends something as if they would send it to a client, and not expect for the partner or the senior associate to clean it up for them. Kind of taking that extra step of sending it to even somebody internally to, kind of help proof before you send it along, that really stands out. And then I think, really just being able to have an intellectual curiosity and understand, not just, particularly as an associate, I think the nature of practice is usually you have kind of a very discrete task. And if that associate is inquiring or wanting to know, how does this really fit into the larger scale? And may not be necessarily necessary for the research point they're doing, but it shows to me that they have a care about how this fits in the larger picture. And a lot of times that context can help inform a better work product, because you might think of something or see something in the research. So there's nothing I love more than when, somebody brings up something I haven't even thought about, and, says, I know you asked for this, but I came across this. What do you think? That's invaluable when you're thinking about, client service. And, I think, everybody really is your client. You have the outside client, but you have a lot of internal clients too. And being able to service them, I think, trains you as an associate how to just become more and more responsive in that level of client service that ultimately will be needed.
Yeah, no, that's all great advice, great tips, and super important, all of those, I think. How about on the flip side? What's something that associates can do to drive you crazy, or maybe a pet peeve, or something that you feel like you have to step in and correct if you see it before it gets out of hand? What in that category?
I've been really lucky, honestly. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of really great people. So I don't have, quite frankly, too much experience with that, which is very grateful for. But
sure.
If you're a jerk, that stands out. I've seen, and that's, something, sloppy work product. Poor communication too, I will say, is, it's super challenging, I think, as an associate if you work for multiple partners and have multiple deadlines. Yeah. And it's unavoidable. And I've been in that spot a lot of times. And I think the best thing that you can do is communicate when you have competing priorities. The worst thing you can do is just not communicate that, hey, I'm covered up, I can't do this, and then you don't hear from anyone for several weeks, and you're expecting something, and there's a misfire there. And oftentimes it's really just a communication, because we all have competing demands on our time. But that is one thing that I will say is probably the most important, and really nothing kind of turns a dynamic than, kind of that sort of miscommunication and feeling like, oh, what happened, and this person disappeared, when they're probably tied up on something else. But we need to know that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny too, because as I'm thinking about that, probably one of the most asked questions I get from candidates about opportunities is, will I be working for one partner or a bunch of partners? And I know usually when I get that question, where it's coming from, having the multiple partner situation and then struggling through that issue of getting all the different assignments with different timelines and the overloading or whatever and the communication. And so I absolutely think that's a real challenge. And but yet it's something that has to get figured out because really in most environments, it's going to at least be more than one partner that's pulling on an associate's time. It's less it seems like it's less often that I find that it's, you're just gonna be working for this one partner and that's it. That doesn't seem to happen that often. Okay. So, one of the things that I was interested to ask you about is on business development. And, as most of the folks listening to this are in those early years of practice, some of them may not have business development on the top of their list necessarily, but I was hoping that you could share a little bit about your experience with business development and how young lawyers ought to be, if nothing else, sort of starting to think about it and maybe having a mid to long range plan about how that's going to come about for them if they're going to continue in private practice, become a partner in a firm, that kind of thing.
I'm very passionate about business development, and I agree that everyone should be thinking about it regardless of the level. And I think when I became an associate, it did feel like this pressure of like, how am I supposed to generate business? And what has been successful for me, and everybody has different takes on this, really is to view it as just planting seeds and developing relationships with no expectation that they will develop into anything further. How my practice has grown is, it's funny. It's the relationships I thought for sure would develop into work, didn't, and the relationships I never thought would ever be, business minded, have turned into some of my best clients. So, it really is. I would treat everybody as a young. The people you're in law school with can end up being, your clients or sure, sending you great work. So it's keeping up with everyone, treating relationships with equal value. I think people can tell if you're in it for, you can't just be in it just to develop business. I think that never really goes right or feels authentic to me. I think, if you do really great work and you excel at the work that you're given, which as a young associate, people gave me work. I did not generate my own work, and I really focused on doing the best I could there. And then also being involved in my community and developing relationships with the people at my level and, the client interface that I did have, that really will naturally and organically grow into a really great practice. I think if you give it time to breathe. And I think you just kind of have to have faith that I think if you do really great work and you try to do the best you can with the people that that word will get around. Pretty much it's a referral business for the most part in what we do. And, and so you never know who's going to be the next person that might give you a case. It might be your opposing counsel. And so, right. It's really just keeping those lines open and trying to do the best you can. And I do think it'll grow. But I think if you put too much pressure or, kind of expectation, and that's the sole reason you're engaging in, a board development or charity work, that's never going to work. Mine is always, you kind of do what you feel passionate about. And then, there's some great unintended benefits that can come from that.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful and hopefully encouraging to people, because I know sometimes when we talk about business development or networking or things like that, it can become, especially for a lot of people that are more introverted, a super scary thing that, I couldn't stand cocktail receptions in law school. I don't want to do them now. How am I going to develop business? But that's such a very narrow and specific way that, networking and business development can happen. Like you're saying, like they're, doing the things that you enjoy and love and do it for those reasons. And then plant the seeds, just by letting them know what you do, can oftentimes be enough. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I'm always good to, if I have something in terms of like, I've never been a cocktail hour kind of networker. What has been successful for me is to get involved in an organization or a bar association that I have a particular interest in, and then sign up to do volunteer service work. For me, it's like if I have a goal or something I'm working on, it's much easier to develop those connections organically with somebody else on a committee than if I'm just walking up to a stranger at a cocktail hour. So for me, that's always been, there's some personalities that are great at that, but
there are.
I've always connected over work, volunteer work, and that sort of like-minded people coming together, and it's a side benefit is the relationships you build.
Yeah. How often would you, or I'm sure it's super easy to put percentages on it and where different clients and business come from, but I'm curious, maybe just significant or insignificant amount that come from people that you haven't met, but that have become aware of you through someone else, just a direct referral of maybe a former client or something that you've done work for, or they tell someone and then that person comes to you. And the first time you ever heard of them is when they call you up or reach out and say, hey, you helped my friend Steve, or you helped this company over here and I know them and we have a problem. Can you help us? Is that something that of the clients that you have, a decent number of them come from that kind of just completely referral only type source, as opposed to you meeting them out somewhere and, like you're saying, some type of volunteer or charity or something like that event?
More and more, I will say, the longer that I practiced on my own, it's becoming a greater percentage of how I get and develop business. And I think that's probably a natural progression.
Right.
Certainly initially, most of it's the people you know directly or have experience working with you before. But the longer that I practice, you start getting those, kind of referral of referrals, and there's no greater compliment. And that's really what you strive to do is kind of build. And if there's somebody I've worked with before that thinks highly enough to refer me to someone else, I think that is, there's no better, system. And I know that I always like to give good referrals out as well. If I find a lawyer in a different area that I feel comfortable sending my clients to, or someone I know that has a problem, because you're vouching for them. So I kind of look for those people in my network that I can help send work to, and also very grateful when that happens the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing better. When I hear from a candidate that, had someone that helped them or has a friend that I helped and then they wanted to see if I could help them. That really is like the ultimate, like you're saying. And it's just, but it doesn't happen in the beginning because you haven't done any of that work yet. You got to do the work and do it well first for that to be able to even be possible. So, but there is hope at the over time that you can kind of transition to that if you do great work for people. So that's awesome. Okay, last topic is about hiring and the process of recruiting and hiring people. When you all are going through that process, what are some of the things like in resumes and in cover letters and writing samples? What are some of the things on paper that you're wanting to see before you decide whether or not to take additional steps with a potential candidate? Thinking about here on the lateral side, some of the stuff we've done together, but on the people that are out practicing already.
So biggest thing, no typos in terms of your resume. I think it's always helpful when you see on a lateral candidate some sort of connection to the type of work that you do. Mm-hmm. So I do commercial work and understand that you're not always going to have that direct, experience. But if you can work your resume to feel as close to what they're looking for, the practice area, that can be helpful. Mm-hmm. I think it's really helpful to see a continuity, and you want to see people who have worked at places for several years and not had a bunch of successive jobs. Unless there's a really good explanation, there can be life circumstances.
Sure.
But I think those are probably in terms of what we're looking for. Obviously there's a certain threshold of qualification that you take just to get the resume. But after that, I think, is it a clean professional product? Does it look like there's, overlap? We're a trial firm. And so, we like to see litigation experience in trials, what have you personally handled? I think those are all important things to kind of get through the door in terms of an initial interview.
So I'm going to ask kind of a resume geeky question here. When you're looking at, say, and to that point of trying to identify the experience and whether it's connected or translates to what you all do, If someone's been working at a firm for 3 years, litigation firm, that position, an associate attorney position, how do you find because there's a lot of different ways that someone in that position could write, let's just call it the bullets underneath that job. Sometimes I'll read resumes and they'll read like maybe the job description would read if the HR person were to put that job out, depose witnesses, attend hearings, and that's the way kind of the job description work. Others would be more specific and kind of talk through kind of exactly what they've done or maybe things they've accomplished in the role. And I'm just curious kind of what works for you, what stands out, or what's helpful for you to know or see there that if they don't put it there, like you'll just have to follow up and ask questions you won't know from the resume, and it's important for you to find out.
I think the more specific you can be, the better. And if you say, and you don't have to go to an incredible granular level as number of depositions and stuff like that, but I can always tell if it's someone kind of just generally describing what they think the job description is versus, did they personally have that experience? And so I think having some sort of level of detail so that you can tell that, I've been responsible for drafting, I've been responsible for taking leads of witnesses and whatnot. Those I think are going to be really helpful because I think part of what we're trying to determine is, kind of usually we're looking for a certain level of experience, and sometimes we want brand new out of law school. Sometimes we want someone who's kind of plug and play depending on the demands of the practice at the time. So I think having a good understanding, because if there's a misfire on that front, I think usually that can be difficult if there's just such a difference in terms of expectations of experience level.
Right. Yeah. And how much training is involved on your end once you get that person in. And it's important to figure that out on the front end for sure. What about once they get into an interview setting? What are some things that candidates can do to stand out in a positive way? What are some things you've seen maybe candidates do that don't perform as well in the interview?
I always like when candidates have their own questions. I think that they're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them. And so it's nice when they have thought about, what they want out of the interview and show an appreciation of, what they would also need to know to help evaluate their decision making. I think that leads for a more honest conversation. I always like when there's an understanding of kind of the firm, because not all firms are created equal, and some sort of, or good questions about how our firm works. Yeah. I think you're looking for someone who you think that you can be in the trenches with. Right. I will say that, kind of a level of arrogantness and entitledness comes through, and that is usually a turnoff. And that kind of shows up almost immediately. Not too often, but when it does, it's apparent. But I think a level of honesty and authenticity is really important too. I mean, I've seen where mostly this is younger law students, but they're so nervous, and I feel like they're just acting like they think we want them to act. And, in reality, if you're going to be an effective trial lawyer, there's a huge component of authenticity there. And working the hours that we work, those walls are going to come down at some point. And so, sure. I think we want a certain level of personality, and, there's obviously boundaries of, you need to be professional and appropriate, but, the ability to have some sort of, lightheartedness. And, I think that really helps in terms of evaluating, is this a place that I can really spend my career? Because I think that is the level of responsibility we go into an interview with, and know it's a huge decision when you're having laterals consider coming over. Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. All right. Well, before we do our rapid fire questions here, is there anything that we haven't talked about, or anything that we didn't go as deep on that you would want to talk about before we move forward? No, I mean, I think we've really covered a good amount of ground. I mean, I think I know you talk a lot with laterals, and having gone through the process now, a few times, I think it's really so interesting to start to learn, what are the different considerations that candidates come to a role. I think having someone like you to be able to broker and really kind of get to the truth of what would make a good match and a good fit, that has been incredibly helpful, because what I've learned owning my own business is, who's working with you is critical. That is the most important. We are selling our time and the team. And so, I've learned the importance of that, and kind of making sure there's a good match there is, I think, one of the most important things candidates can think about when trying to evaluate making a leap.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I mean, I think one of the things that, as you're talking about that comes to mind is, and I appreciate this about you all and your firm and working with you and a lot and most really of the candidates and firms I work with. But I think one of the things that's key on that is that you were talking about authenticity before, but just being honest with ourselves about what we want, and from a firm side, like what do we really, really need in a candidate, and communicating that up front. And then on the candidate side, what do I really want out of a law firm and out of a career and out of a job? And sometimes it's a process to get to that answer, and you have to go on some interviews and experience some things for that to kind of crystallize for folks. But then sometimes I think it's just people are, will hold back or forget about something, and then it, can create some mismatches or some just inefficiency in the process of getting to the end goal of putting that good match together. And so, yeah, being able to share as much information up front as possible from both sides is super helpful on that front. But no, that's great. Thanks for that. All right. Rapid fire. One word, one phrase, answers. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. All right. Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Grit.
Grit. Love that. What habit has been key to your success?
Never assuming. Always going back and double checking, making sure, rethinking.
Awesome. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Okay, so I just got this. It's called The Remarkable. And
yes.
if you're
familiar, now the second person to mention it.
It has changed my practice. It essentially is
right?
An electronic notepad, and I used to have hundreds of notepads. And this has revolutionized my day-to-day. So if no one is familiar, go look up The Remarkable. Yes,
we will link to it. And I'm forgetting who mentioned it before. I think it was Reagan. But yeah, no, that was, and it's on my list now to consider purchasing. I've been looking at them, and there's a few others that are kind of in the market, but it was the first I had heard of it. So that's really cool. All right. Oh, I'm also going to link to Grit in your answer, the book about grit that the professor wrote. I'm forgetting her name now, but it was a really good book. I read it 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, a TED Talk about it too. Okay. What would you list first on the interest section of your resume?
Travel.
You like to travel.
I like to travel.
Where do you like to go? Obviously. Yeah.
Anywhere overseas. I think I love San Antonio, but it's good for the soul to leave and learn new things. I think I learn something new every time I go overseas and just experience a new culture. I like the experience of a culture shock. So, I work hard and I also really believe in taking a full 2 weeks break and shutting it down. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite destination, a favorite spot?
I love Italy.
See, that's, I think, my wife and I's favorite as well. So
it's hard, it's common, but it's hard to. I also love Cambodia. I had that was my bar trip. I went to Cambodia and Thailand, and we did Cambodia on a whim, and I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. But if anyone is considering it, the people there are fantastic. We went to Angkor Wat, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was probably the biggest growth experience in terms of really seeing how other people live and navigate. It was fantastic. So highly recommend Cambodia.
Awesome. All right, last one. Your favorite legal movie?
A Time to Kill.
Good one. That's awesome. That's the list of the 90s Grisham books and movies is long. So when we do the legal movie deep dive episodes here. We've done a couple of the Grisham ones. Haven't done A Time to Kill yet, saving it a little bit because you don't want to do all the best ones up front and not have good ones down the road. So kind of have to sparse those in. But excited to do that one.
The novel's better, but the movie's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lauren, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show with us. It's been great to visit with you, and I wish you and your firm all the best.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, my thanks again to Lauren Valkenaar for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? And if you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you're interested in any of the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or you just want to visit more generally about the lateral market and what might be out there for you, would love to do that. So please get in touch. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.